All right. Well, welcome to 2021 Apple IT Trends. We've got a ton to cover today as we wrap up 2020 and look ahead to a brand new year. My name is Garrett, Senior Manager of Product Marketing here at Jamf, and I'm really excited to be back again to kind of unwrap and polish off that crystal ball and maybe look ahead to 2021. Now, before we get going on what's coming next, I actually want to take a step back and look at 2020 because I think it's the maybe third year in a row that I've done this prediction webinar. And boy, I think back 12 months and I guarantee you one thing, my deck last year did not include anything that was about to happen in 2020. We were thinking of technology and small changes, iterative changes, things that would impact employee choice. And while those things did take place, of course, the news cycle and our jobs were really dominated by the pandemic and the changes it forced on our organizations. Remote work, remote learning, telehealth, all of these things really blossomed in a way that we didn't see coming and could not have seen coming prior to the beginning of 2020. So, I think just to take a moment here at the beginning and to pause to probably say well done, first of all, for surviving 2020, but also I think for a lot of us, for doing the best work of our careers under the pressure of everything that happened in the past year, of really the entire organization looking at our function in IT in a new way with new need and new criticality. I think a lot of us rose to that challenge and really found a way to succeed in the face of really large and significant challenge. So well done for all of you that feel like, all right, we've survived, we're moving on, we did some excellent work in 2020. It's time to shift gears and to begin looking at 2021. So we've got a few trends here that I want to touch on for 2021. A few things that we think will define the coming year, of course, in light of the ongoing pandemic. So stay safe, make sure that your organization stays safe, and know that Jamf has your back through the coming year, just like we did in 2020 and since 2002. So a couple of big macro trends here that I want to touch on in this webinar. The employee experience is evolving. The perception of tech is shifting to something new. We're connecting human experience in a brand new way. This is actually a very fertile opportunity. I want to touch on that. And then tailoring Apple security. Security has been a part of, it seems like, every deck in every conference for the past 10 years plus. Well, it's getting a little more niche and a little more tailored toward Apple as we start to see more Mac adoption. We'll touch on that as well. So without further ado, let's move ahead and look at our first prediction of 2021. I want to jump right in, be respectful of everyone's time here, and of course, leave time for Q&A on the back end of this webinar. So if you have questions, toss them out in that Q&A panel. You'll see it right there in the webinar, and just toss them out there. I'll respond, our team will respond, and I'll also be back at the end. We've got time set aside for Q&A. So feel free to just toss that in. We'll leave plenty of time on the back end of this webinar. So employee experience 2.0, what does that mean? And what is this going to do to our organizations? Well, the first thing is really kind of defining what this means and what it looks like. It's the intersection of technology and the employee experience coming together in a new way. We think they're driving greater engagement. And so one of the best ways we can respond as IT admins is to listen. It's actually not to take an action, to plan a project, to request budget. It's really to start listening to your team in a new way. And we think that, look, this has probably been happening in a lot of your organizations for a couple of years now with the advent of employee choice. We've seen this broadly across the Jamf customer base, that when we ask how people prefer to be productive, they largely say Apple. Overwhelming majorities say, I prefer Mac, I prefer iPhone for my work experience, and we can power that as IT admins. And so begin to listen not only to their tool of choice, but how they want facilitating better and broader innovation to take place in your organization. This might be a key application or access to resources through self-service. It might be a ticketing workflow. We see this in a lot of different ways depending on your type of organization. It can differ from industry to industry, from small to large, but we're definitely seeing this trend at the macro level. The technology and the employee experiences coming together to really being one in the same. Now, one of the biggest outcomes that I think should really be an eye-popping result at the end of 2020 for all of us is that employees proved to be more productive at home than they were in the office in 2019. And this is really interesting stuff because there's a trade-off wherever you work, right? In an office, at your house, a hybrid between the two. There's always kind of a give and take there. And some people prefer one or the other. The biggest trend we saw was that giving that choice, kind of learning to be productive in a remote environment, was hugely beneficial to organizations in 2020. 50% more tasks performed through an employee's own initiative in 2020 in a remote setting. That is a massive change that employees feel more empowered to kind of take the reins and make something happen. That's a really big deal. And that is a significant impact to productivity for any organization experiencing that. 9% more time interacting with customers and partners. Of course, this is a big deal. I think any organization, commercial, healthcare, education, anytime we can interact more directly with our customers and partners, our constituency, it's a good thing. And I think a lot of times we're so busy, we feel like that's not possible. But we proved in 2020 there is room to do more, to have more touch points directly with our customers. 9% increase. That was great to see. And finally, large meetings, time spent in large meetings down 12%. This is also kind of a good thing, right? It's good to see that we're spending less time around a table, internal focused. We're getting more accomplished with those large meetings when they're in session, but still paring them down by 12%, meaning your staff can get back to being productive, get back to impacting end users, customers, partners, and more, rather than sitting around that table. And I think we've all kind of had that feeling of like, man, the week, the day, it was dominated by meetings. When am I going to do that customer outreach, that project that's on my desk? Well, in 2020, we saw 12% less time spent in those large meetings. That's a great change. We think it means more productivity across the board. So that's a good thing to see. We're also seeing a really interesting shift with job satisfaction. Now, this is something that's near and dear to our hearts here at Jamf. We talked about job satisfaction for years, right? If you've been on these IT Trends webinars in the past, you've heard me talk about this, that employee choice is key to making employees productive, successful, creative, and sticky with your organization. Well, this is another reinforcing data point, two data points really, from 2020 that support that entire thesis, that employee choice, and further, beyond just hardware, giving employees a choice of where they work makes for a better company. Remote workers say they are 57% more likely to be satisfied with their jobs than the average American. Super interesting data point there, that 50%, 57% improvement just by being remote. Workers with the option to work either at an office or home were 58% more likely to love their jobs. And again, the option to be a hybrid worker in the office or at work at home is super critical to kind of this I love my job mindset. I might be somebody that prefers 4 or even 5 days a week in an office setting. I like that kind of rubbing shoulders feeling, right? I love those random conversations from running into somebody in the hallway. But we do see that providing that option makes people more likely to feel like they're engaged, creative, happy, and loving their jobs. And so, two important data points here. As IT leaders, we are no longer stuck only thinking about hardware and software. We are now thinking about how that hardware, how that software impacts the employee experience. Higher job satisfaction coming out of 2020, that's sure a big silver lining. We're also seeing a really interesting trend in how enterprises can save money, a positive financial gain out of this trend of remote work. Now, this is kind of obvious, right? With fewer folks going into the office day in and day out, that's a savings for real estate. And we're actually seeing that, according to this analysis, it's about $10,000 a head, which is significant for full-time telework. 6 of 10 employers saying, yes, we are seeing cost savings as a major benefit of telecommuting in 2020. 60% of employers. That is a really significant deal. And whether you're on one end of this spectrum or the other, I think this is a great data point to take back to your org to either shore up your decision to telecommute and say, yes, we are doing the right thing. And furthermore, we might be able to look at our real estate portfolio and realize a savings there. On the flip side, you could say, look, we are not telecommuting today. We have not made that decision, but we should think about it long term. It does make employees more engaged, feel like they love the company more, and could realize a financial savings for the company as well. That's a powerful 1-2 punch. And so if you're thinking of takeaways, that's a pretty good thing to write down as a takeaway from the webinar here today. To start rounding out the employee experience takeaways here, though, I want to talk about how you make your company more competitive. And this is something we are all thinking about. For years, we have seen the war for talent, right? This is a major factor in a lot of our strategic planning because hiring great employees is tough. Keeping them around long term is tougher. And so, what we're seeing coming out of 2020 is that 43% of full time employees in America want to work remote even after the pandemic. That is a major shift for a lot of organizations that maybe were driven by the pandemic to adopt remote work for the first time. Well, leaving the pandemic at some point in the future, your organization needs to be ready to support these 43% of employees that want to keep working remote long term. Furthermore, 37% would switch to a job that gave them the ability to work off-site at least part-time. Again, major factor here for stickiness of your employee base. And look, if you're hiring great talent and you're thinking, we love our staff, we feel like a family, we're engaged, people are, great and productive wherever they are, this is something you can drive into your strategic planning to say, we've got a great team, we better not lose them, right? 37% would switch to find a job that gave them that ability to be hybrid, part-time on-site, part-time off-site. It's definitely time to look at your HR policies about remote work if you haven't already. 2020 was a major instigator in a lot of that. So what's our big takeaway here? What's our kind of key takeaway? Well, I think companies need to look at doubling down on top-notch technology. It's facilitating not only better hardware, better software across your org. That's good for productivity, but it makes for a better employee experience. We keep coming back to this here at Jamf, but you as an IT leader, you've got a chance to kind of elevate beyond just hardware and software choice, but to think about employee experience as this strategic pillar. And if you want to make that great, you do it through doubling down on top-notch technology that your team prefers. Largely, when you ask them, that's Apple. So take a look at that. The second thing, though, is that employee choice programs are still key today. They have been for a long time. I've certainly talked about them for years here at Jamf. And in tandem with something like Jamf, an Apple enterprise management solution, you're rolling that out at scale. It's easier than ever to take your existing IT team and to manage employee choice without needing additional headcount. So we think that's a major game changer. It can be a competitive advantage for your company as well. Definitely give this some thought if employee choice is still a dream and not a reality at your organization. So macro trend number 2, the shift in tech perception. This is a big deal because we all sit in that IT seat, right? And I think day to day, it's pretty easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of just keeping up with device refresh and handling new application requests and fixing, just those day-to-day troubleshooting tasks that arise from everybody being remote all of a sudden in 2020. But as we roll out more employee choice programs, we're driving greater engagement. We're saying the employee experience, we need it to be excellent. And it's very strategically important to our company. Well, we can actually respond in a pretty powerful way, not by doing something or acting on a project, but by listening, by pausing what we're doing, setting our initiatives aside for a day or a couple of days, and just listening to our teams. It really helps to kind of bring some fresh blood into your IT organization. We think this is a great way to hear and to validate, if an employee choice program was or is the right step for your organization. We also feel really passionately here at Jamf about inclusion and diversity, what we call I and D, right? Inclusion and diversity. This is something we spend a lot of time talking about internally at Jamf. And just as a kind of peek behind the curtain, we think it's a key tool for facilitating better and broader innovation. We certainly have seen success from this. And so if you're sitting there in an IT seat thinking, most of my time is still focused on kind of that day to day tactical level, but you want to grow into more of a strategic IT leader, this is a great way to do it. Think about bringing in more voices, a broader cross section of your organization, making that more diverse, more inclusive with technology. That's a great way to elevate your own position to better impact the entire organization. It's really powerful stuff. And one way we see this is actually with our innovation hubs here at Jamf. We ship these shipping containers fitted out with tech all around the world to create more opportunity for more folks that would normally not be able to access Apple hardware. So we love that initiative. Think about something like this, whether it's on a smaller or a bigger scale, you can definitely be the IT leader that has a lasting impact through inclusion and diversity efforts. So a couple of key takeaways here: listen early and often to employee input. Can't overstate this. Employees have opinions, right? All we need to do is ask. It makes our jobs easier because we've got better data, some fresh blood coming into our IT thinking. And really, it feeds into number two here: proactively seeking to include diverse voices in your IT planning. This doesn't mean only a bunch of IT admins sitting around planning your strategy for 2021. Bring in some teachers, bring in some IT experts who aren't in IT. Bring in some folks that just joined your organization fresh out of college. Start asking those questions and then build your plan. You'll be amazed at how that can really kind of be a beneficial force in your strategic planning. So, our third macro trend here is connecting human experience. And I personally really like this one because we see it differently in different industries. We'll start here with education, but we'll roll through four different examples. That, in education, we see this primarily between the student and the teacher. It's that really unique relationship that is so critical to development, to teaching, to really doing an excellent job as a teacher. And it used to revolve around the classroom. Until 12 months ago, we all looked around and we saw every student we were instructing by and large, right? Was there virtual learning? Yes, but it was definitely the exception to the rule. Well, here comes 2020 and virtual learning, distance learning, that needs to become the primary mode of instruction for teachers and learning for students overnight. And so if you're still grappling with this, you're thinking, man, 2020 threw us for a loop, and I'm not sure teachers feel empowered yet, in control of their classrooms. I'm not sure students feel engaged yet. And I'm not sure parents have a way to kind of be a part of that process. We've got some great applications like Jamf Teacher, Jamf Parent, Jamf Student. They help bridge that gap. So take a look at those. If you're not using them today, that is a fantastic next step for you and your organization. And speaking of being thrown for a loop, boy, think back to healthcare just a year ago, where healthcare was, kind of the way it's been for most of our lives, right? You would walk in, see your physician, see your doctor face to face, get great care, and then go home. None of that could happen early in the pandemic. And it's really been on and off depending on where you live and how the pandemic has gone since then. That's a major pain point, not only for providers trying to do a great job and serve their communities, it's a major pain point for patients as well. And if you're someone that is admitted to a care facility, you're working with a physician or a provider, but they can't maybe enter your room because of health concerns. Maybe you can't have anybody in the room with you because of health concerns. Boy, that's a tough situation. And we really wanted to kind of find a way to positively impact that situation early in the pandemic. That's virtual visits with Jamf. Take a look at that if you haven't already, if you work in this space, but it can kind of remotely connect provider, patient, and loved one in a really seamless way. We think that's a great way to kind of take your next step in this journey of connecting humans even in the middle of a crazy year that, it might spread or bleed into 2021. We'll see. We hope this all wraps up very quickly and everyone stays safe. But if you're experiencing this pain point, take a look at virtual visits. It might be kind of that key that you're looking for. Hospitality is another great example here, though, that, a year ago, it was just kind of day-to-day business as usual. You would check into a hotel, touch every doorknob, talk to everybody as you kind of checked into that facility face to face. You were maybe a foot apart. Well, none of that's true anymore. And it has changed radically overnight what it looks like to travel, if you travel at all, to stay at a hotel when you're staying in a city that's not your own. And so leveraging technology can make that guest experience not only rise to the level it was at before the pandemic, but really make it unique in a way that it, maybe wasn't possible prior to the pandemic. Things like keyless entry are more common, more ubiquitous than they ever were because the pandemic drove innovation and adoption of really cool technology like early check-in on your mobile device, keyless room entry with your phone, and so forth. And finally, in retail, I think more than anything, the Main Street retail experience has really gone through some ups and some downs in 2020. Businesses leveraging technology to customize the shopping experience, they seem to kind of have this edge over a business that's not, because they're able to control how the customer interacts with their business. That's key. There's a lot that's unknown. There was in 2020, and there certainly is going into 2021. The more that you can tailor how customers interact with your business, the better. And if it helps you streamline inventory, spend less time doing repetitive tasks with the same amount of headcount, all the better. Providing a better sales service as well on the sales floor. These are all great things that really help streamline operations so your team spends less time doing ops and more time focusing on customers. That's kind of what this comes back to, is customers for the retail experience in 2021. Anything we can do with technology to facilitate more interaction and a more tailored experience, the better. And so our key takeaways here: leaning on purpose-built apps for unique needs, things like Jamf Setup and Reset or Jamf Teacher. All of those niche use cases that you're feeling, come check out Jamf and the Jamf Marketplace. We've got some great applications. In fact, more than 325 of them today listed on the marketplace, ready for you to adopt and take out to your organization. And also consider how tech can positively impact your entire business, from IT to customer. This is what we just talked about, streamlining inventory management, for example. How can we make that an easier process so IT is less in the weeds and more focused on your end user? That's a great question, and it's not easy to solve, but with a tool like Jamf at your side, we think you can get a lot closer in 2021. So the final macro trend that we are seeing, and this is really something that we've kind of predicted for a couple of years. This was coming, tailored Apple security being a major need. We've called this out a couple of times in the past. You've probably heard it at JNUC or on a different webinar, but we knew this need was out there. We knew this need was coming. And I think 2020 was really the year where this was validated, where people said, everybody's remote. We're not in the office behind the firewall any longer. I need a tailored solution in the same way that I do for my Windows devices, right? I need one for my Apple devices. What do I do specifically for Mac? Well, that's where a lot of folks found themselves in 2020. And we think in 2021 that Mac security takes center stage. Adoption continues to rise. We've seen this for years, and it's continuing to go up. In tandem, Mac-focused cybersecurity threats, that's a very real thing for anybody deploying any kind of device, right? We need to keep an eye on cybersecurity and on the threat vectors that our organization is exposed to. So as you deploy more Macs, it's kind of natural that you're exposed a little bit more to a Mac-specific threat, right? Because you suddenly have a Mac in your organization. And so this data point, I think, is very interesting and really can inform, again, your strategic planning. 98% of orgs plan to prioritize security spending over the next year. And so you're sitting here, maybe it's the tail end of 2020, early 2021, whenever you watch this, and you're kind of thinking, all right, I know that security is a thing that I should care about, and it's probably become a bigger pain point in the past year because of remote work. But what do I do with that? What's the kind of actionable takeaway that I bring back to my boss or my boss's boss? I think this might be it. Prioritizing spending specifically for Mac security. If you're deploying more Macs, what do I do to secure those Macs? It's probably not a one size fits all solution. It's probably a Mac specific tailored solution. Of course, we offer Jamf Protect as a Mac specific security solution, but we think this trend is really growing into its own in 2021. It certainly has in 2020, and we're betting that that continues in the new year. So think about Mac adoption. If you're seeing that driven by employee choice, that is a great flag for you as an IT leader to take that more seriously. And second of all, investigate whether a purpose-built solution like Jamf Protect is the right next step. If it is, fantastic. And if it's not, hey, we're here for you. If you've got questions, no pitch, no pressure. Just talk to us if you do have questions about securing your Mac fleet. Happy to talk. And so we've run through 4 big macro trends. That was a ton of information here in just a short period of time. It's going to take 12 months to see whether I am right or maybe in the case of 2020, very, very wrong, because there's a huge curveball coming. Hopefully in 2021, that curveball is positive, because I don't think any of us want to repeat 2020 again, but hopefully some actionable insights here for all of you that can affect in a good way your strategic planning, how you view your role, and really how you can positively impact all of your end users at your company. So thank you for joining. Let's jump into Q&A.